Okay, so Dash, great to have you back on the program. You know, there's so much to talk about, so let's just jump right into it. As a producer, content creator, and a Gen Z activist, how do you perceive the current political climate?
Well, there's a lot of different ways to answer that question. I think the political climate is very heated right now. I think a lot of people my age, when it comes to the presidential race, everyone has their minds made up. I think Donald Trump is going to get blown away. It's going to be a bloodbath. There's not much you can do to convince someone to like vote for Trump or Biden at this point. Everyone's got their minds made up about that. But the political climate, well, if you look at the campuses, it's very intense right now. But that's about the foreign conflict. So there's two different climates going on right now. I think they're trying to tie a lot of what's happening on campus to Biden and the presidential race, but I don't think that's going to be really effective or a big player when it comes time for voting. But
what's that?
Oh, I said it's just not a fun climate to be in right now. Even like the discussions of politics have been very intense.
Well, especially not if you're a student. I mean, think about it too. These are the same students that, lost out their first year, some their second year as a result of COVID, right? Yeah. That are now, especially their first year, that they lost out. Now, all of a sudden, many of them who are supposed to graduate, there's not even going to be a graduation because of the fear of protest. Now, you've heard me probably say a million times that I am a firm believer in Gen Z and their right to protest, their right to their First Amendment. Nevertheless, I do draw a line when you start talking about anti-Semitism, when you start talking about creating fear and apprehension to other students, simply because you don't want to discuss the differences that you may have, whether it's on a political divide, whether it's on race, on sexual orientation, whatever it might be. I have a real problem when it starts to turn violent. Oh,
I'm 100% with you. I mean, obviously, everyone has the right to protest, and on campus, you're in college, you're learning about all of these conflicts and getting both sides and the different points of view. But I imagine, because I graduated UCLA, but I imagine right now it is just terrifying to walk through campus, especially if you're Jewish, because look, if you're talking one-on-one to someone, like I've talked one-on-one to UCLA students, you can have a very nuanced conversation about what's going on. But when it gets into the protesting and, as you see, like the mob mentality goes on, you're either all in on one side or all in on the other. And if you're just a student who doesn't want to be involved in this, it's very scary. I mean, you've seen a lot of anti-Semitic symbols, and doesn't seem to be a lot of control on these campuses either by the chancellors or the campus security. I mean, where they need to come in and regulate this, or it just turns into chaos. It's no longer school anymore.
So since you mentioned you went to UCLA, I saw on television the other day that there was a professor, a UCLA professor, who was trying to get into the building where his classes are, and he was tackled. I believe it was UCLA. He was tackled on the ground, and his earbud went flying out. I think it was UCLA. Regardless,
yeah.
This is the problem that we're talking about. This is where it turns violent, and one response, like let's say the professor was a big guy, and the student that was coming after him and tackled him, let's say, was smaller. You find that a lot of these professors, some of them used to be on the fucking wrestling team, right? I mean, or that they were on the football team, or they were just an athlete altogether. And then the guy turns around and cracks the fucking kid across the head because he tackled them. Now that
Yeah.
becomes an all-out melee because you have 1,000 students in that encampment that are now going to attack this professor who by coincidence happened to be Jewish.
Yeah,
This is the
exactly.
problem.
I think it's, you know what I think is horrible, that I personally don't think that they should let any non-students on the campus to set up tents. I think that's, I mean, just alone, if you have an adult coming to a campus where there are students and setting up a camp to live in is separately, it's pretty inappropriate. But then at the same time,
I was going to say, forget about protesting. It's creepy, right?
It's creepy.
I mean, you know, if it wasn't involved in this Israel Hamas scenario, you would basically be calling them sexual predators.
Yeah, predators, and they're in the camps with other students. I mean, I find that to be bizarre on its own. And yeah, you know, it's so like you can't, if there is a massive protest, you can't really speak out against them, or you could get attacked. It's just you kind of just have to like submit and take it. Now, if they're just protesting, vocally, which I've seen a lot of, you know, peaceful protests, and that's okay. That's their right. But the second it goes to violence, and I believe that the campuses have allowed it to get violent. They haven't like preemptively been there waiting to shut it down if it becomes violent, because they're afraid to kind of intervene in a free speech thing. But you have to protect the safety of the students and the faculty. Like, teachers shouldn't be getting assaulted, and it's scary times. And I don't think anyone knows what to do. They don't want to get.
That's for sure. Hey, let me ask you this, Dash. You know, because so many times when you see these protesters, like, and I talk about it all the time, there was this young girl, pink hair, the whole bit, LGBTQ plus for Palestine, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure out, what's her goal? What's the goal of all of these protesters, most of whom have not a fucking clue what they're even protesting about? Now, I get it. You know, you're live streaming, you're Instagramming, you're TikToking, you're doing the whole bit. I get it. You're going to get more followers and so on. Maybe you become, you know, an influencer. But other than that, what are they trying to accomplish here? Especially like this young girl, LGBTQ plus for Palestine, for Gaza.
Where they're
when somebody like yourself who goes there and trolls the protesters, right? You start to interview them and you say, you realize that if you were holding that sign in Gaza, that Hamas would stone you to death because what you believe in, your sexual orientation, while here in America, you're free to be you. There, you will die. So I'm just trying to figure out, what's her goal? What's the goal of the bulk of these protesters?
I think in some strange, or not in, I think in a way that some of the LGBTQ protesters that we've seen, well, yeah, they would be executed if they were over there. But I think they also align with, they LGBTQ people have been oppressed in this country. And I think what they've been taught, or what they've learned at school, or from like these protesters, is that, you know, the oppressed people over there are the Gazans. And so they are feeling some sort of, they're feeling an alignment with the Gazans. But it's interestingly, at the same time, we're talking about Jews who have been the most oppressed.
Well, I was just going to say that to you. Has there ever been a people more oppressed than the Jewish people throughout all of history?
That's what I'm saying. That's where, to me, I wish this thing wasn't so anti-Semitic. I wish that the protesters were protesting Netanyahu, maybe the Israeli government, and Hamas. But they don't have to say, I don't like when they say, you know, this Zionist scumbags. That to me just sounds like Jewish scumbags. And so they're throwing around the word Zionists a lot, and it just seems like a coded way to say Jews. And so it's very, especially when you hear it coming from an LGBTQ, whoever it's coming from in this country, it's like it's for some reason the Jewish people have been labeled in this as the perpetrators, and the oppressed are the Gazans, and I don't think that's where they're aligning with Palestinians, regardless of the fact that if they were over there, LGBTQ is not allowed over there.
Understood. The thing that I would recommend to these, we'll call them combating students, right? Those that are pro-Israel, those that are, pro-Palestine. Tell you, when I was in college, half my friends were from the Middle East. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Jordan, Lebanon, Palestine. Our friendship group, which is solid as a rock, right? We lived together, we ate together, we partied together, we shared everything. You needed a jacket, they went into my closet and took a jacket. You needed, because your car was boxed in the driveway, they took any car that they wanted. None of this meant anything. Whatever you needed, we were one unit. I say that because what I would love to see, instead of pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian students attacking one another, join hands together, be a unified voice for a change, and then call for Netanyahu to resign. Call for Hamas to lay down their weapons today and release the 130 hostages. Show that you are more compassionate than the fucking animals that came over the wall on October 7th, killed, maimed, raped, took hostages, burned alive, killed babies. Show that you're more compassionate, that you want peace, that we can achieve peace together as a young generation, as Gen Z, instead of basically perpetuating the same shit that's going on day in and day out for the last 2,500 years. Show a difference. I was talking to a buddy of mine, Middle Eastern, the other day, and we were talking about this. His wife happens to be Palestinian. I've been friends with both of them since 1984. And we turned around and we said, if our friendship group ran the world, there would never be war. There would never be war amongst us. Not religion, nothing would break us apart, because our friendship, our care, our compassion, our love for one another transcends all. And that's the hope that I wish that these young students would see. But the problem that you have is you have these instigators, these paid activists that are infiltrating into the schools. There was one school, I forget which one, maybe you could remind me. One school, they arrested like 50 people. Out of the 50 people, I think 6 of them were students, and the other 44 were agitators.
That's right. I think it was at NYU potentially, or it was Columbia. I think there was. I read that too, and it dawned on me that what you're saying about peace, which is I agree with your entire rant there. That I think most people, if you talk to them, they just want a ceasefire, a 2-state solution. They want peace and no more war. You
really believe that, Dash? When I hear these folks, these young kids talking, what they want is they want to go back to to the days where Israel doesn't exist. They're not looking for a 2-state solution. They're looking for Israel not to exist and the property, the land, be turned back over to the Palestinian people.
I think you're right about that. I think, though, there's a lot of, like you said, there are outside agitators and activists, as well as lot of social media algorithmic brainwashing, if you call it, that are just planting these ideas into young people's minds. And I remember just being at UCLA as a student, and a lot of the like dialogue and the things that I learned were all about, it's all about victim and oppressed. Usually every historical comic, there's a victim and a oppressed group. And I believe in it's just been taught now that Israel is the total, like 100% the oppressors, and the Palestinians have been oppressed. And so you talk to these students and they just believe that it should be all Palestine, and from the river to the sea, it should be given all back to Palestinians. And there's just, it's kind of like they're battling two separate sets of education. And then you have social media coming in and really amplifying and exacerbating the points of view. And then you add in the activists. And I don't think a lot of students even know what the truth is anymore, but you just get swept away by whichever way the protesters are going.
Yeah. Hey, Tish, let me ask you this then. What actually inspired you to become actively involved in political advocacy as a member of Gen Z?
Well, interestingly enough, I got really involved during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, which kind of reminds me of the same like time we're in right now. It's an election year. There are very heated protests about major social issues. And I just think that I always thought I would wait till you're successful to start like speaking about your political beliefs. But then I was like, you know what? We all have this social media. Let me get out there now and just try to tell people to vote like against Donald Trump. That's really always been my goal. I just see him as an evil, psychopathic, rapist monster. So I've always been about just the domestic politics. So this whole era is rather, I mean, the 2024, it's definitely about a lot more than just Trump and Biden. So I'm sticking in it to try to make sure we win the presidency, House, and Senate. So I'm just motivated by a fear of just letting this orange criminal get back into the Oval Office and end democracy. I can't believe that anyone's voting for him, but let's make sure that more people don't vote for him.
So let me ask you this then. Can you discuss with my audience a recent project or a campaign that you're currently involved in that actually addresses the political issues relevant to your generation? You see, I personally believe that between the female vote and the Gen Z vote, and couple that with the Black vote, I don't see anything but a massive blue wave coming down the line. Now, I hear all these fucking jerk-off pundits. There's no other way to describe them. They're fucking jerk-off pundits. Like, well, Gen Z is, they're angry with Joe Biden. That's true. That's true. They could be angry with Joe Biden. But at the end of the day, Joe Biden also just got rid of how many billions of dollars in student debt? He's actually changed so many things that are beneficial to, Gen Z. You have, jobs. Of course, the issue of jobs, the greatest job creator in America's history. Then on top of that, you also have, you have Biden, who wants to create infrastructure with better, internet, better Wi-Fi for everybody, free of charge, the CHIPS Act, etc. There's so many positive things that are going on. And I understand that they could be angry about what's taking place in the Middle East. It's funny because the whole issue of Russia-Ukraine has somehow managed to be swept under the fucking rug. Right? Yeah, there's other issues that also warrant Gen Zers' attention. This somehow created a massive movement. Yeah, but as Ed Koch once famously said, if you agree with me 6 out of 12 times, you should vote for me. If you agree with me 12 out of 12 times, you should see a psychiatrist. Nobody's going to agree with everybody. I don't agree with Joe Biden on 12 out of 12 things, but the things that I think are important to America, like the future of democracy, overturning this ridiculous, fucked up Supreme Court decision, the Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade, and the fact that kids don't even know, most people don't even know that the Dobbs decision didn't just affect Roe v. Wade. And that's your generation. You know, my generation, when you're 57 years old, though I was with a fraternity brother last night who's 2 years older than me. He's got a 5-year-old kid. I was like, oh man, second wife, the whole 9 yards, right? Roe v. Wade and women's rights affect your generation. To me, it's a hands down. It affects my daughter. It affects my son. It affects you. And that to me is a non-starter.
Non-starter. I was just going to say it's a non-starter. And to bring it to like what your point about, you know, I think the media and the press, including some liberal newspapers like the New York Times, which I thought they were very, you know, reliable. But if you notice, every time Biden accomplishes something, or if he killed it at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, in the same week that Donald Trump was farting and falling asleep at his criminal trial, they come out with a poll that says, oh, Trump is leading by 6%. I just think it's a bunch of bullshit. I just think that if the race isn't a horse race, if it's not really close, then nobody's going to watch the news anymore or read the papers. So they're very incentivized to make it seem like, you know, Biden's lead is slipping or Gen Z no longer is supporting Biden. But we have the young people are never going to not vote in favor of keeping abortion rights. It's as simple as that. That is the one issue we swept 2020. It's going to happen again. Not to mention this time Donald Trump is now a criminal defendant and an insurrectionist. I just don't think that the race is going to be even close. So I'm actually not worried at all, which I'm very less stressed out this time around. But the media is definitely ramping up the fear. So it's good that they have podcasts like you where it's just cutting out the bullshit.
Well, that's what we tried to do here. Hey, can I ask you another question? Because you put out on a post on, I believe it was on Twitter or maybe Instagram, you put out a post regarding you believe that Merrick Garland should indict Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. And I thought that was really interesting, considering I started Googling this. I don't believe that a Supreme Court justice has ever been indicted for what is perceived as a criminal event, right? Discuss that post, if you would. Well,
for one, I think Merrick Garland I think he's horrible. I think he's the worst attorney general of all time. Even worse than Bill Barr in a certain way, because not that he's corrupt like Bill Barr, but that he's so afraid of appearing political that hasn't indicted a single congressperson or Republican senator who participated in a deadly coup against the United States government. So what kind of attorney general is that? Where's the Department of Justice there? I think and that's a decision that he's made not to indict. It's not that he's working on an indictment. It's been almost 4 years and nothing. Then you combine that with Clarence Thomas, a Supreme Court justice who takes bribes from billionaire Harlan Crow, and his wife, Ginny Thomas, was on paper engaged in the insurrection. And he's not indicting them. Hasn't even opened an investigation as far as we can see. I think he's horrible. I think that's the only thing that I disagree with Biden on was his appointment of Merrick Garland, who's just feckless, soft, no aggression, and just no. If I was the attorney general, they would all be indicted, all of them, and you have the evidence to indict them.
And rightfully so. Nobody has said that more often on this show than me. I am not a fan of Merrick Garland's at all. I think that Merrick Garland, and I say this all the time, I am not questioning his intelligence. I think the
Yeah.
guy happens to be, at least paper-wise, he's brilliant. He should be a Supreme Court judge, but he should not be an attorney general. Because you come from a Bill Barr, who was a sycophantic fuckface, right? Who was willing to do things, that an attorney general should not do. And then compare it to Merrick Garland, who is, as you said, feckless, weak, non-active, lame, impotent, all of those terms. And you put a contrast between the two. One was doing shit at somebody else's direction that they shouldn't have been doing. The other one is doing nothing despite the fact that everybody's telling him that he should do it because the evidence is clear. You brought up such an amazing point. The evidence is there. Not one member of Congress, not one, has been indicted for January 6th. Here's what we know. There were communications going on between members of Congress and people on the outside. We also know that it was a member of Congress that brought in one of the insurrectionists to map out the entire Capitol so that they knew where to go in order to get to Nancy Pelosi, to get to the to get to the Senate, where they were confirming the electoral votes. All of this is captured in text messages, in communications, in emails, and so on. And you're right, not one member of Congress, not one Republican has been indicted so far.
They sought pardons too for their crimes. This is what's actually frustrating to me. Like, if you talk about why maybe someone wouldn't show up to vote again, which I don't think will happen, but it's like, hey, why am I having to vote against Marjorie Taylor Greene again? Like, why isn't she in prison? This should be not our job. The Justice Department should have handled that. And so I think people may be frustrated by the same message of like, we have to save our democracy. We have to save our democracy. It's like, well, we did save our democracy in 2020. Now, where are you, Merrick Garland? Do your job. Like, you can vote, but you also have to prosecute criminals, or you're going to lose your democracy again because he's too afraid to hold any of them accountable. So I don't know, like, I mean, it's too late to fire the guy. It's way too late for that. Then all the cases get like stalled again. But it's very unfortunate that we were stuck with him.
Yeah. Bad move. Hey, let me ask you this then, because again, being that you're so involved with the Gen Z community and the content creation, what do you believe are the most pressing political issues facing young people today? And how do you think that they should be addressed?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me personally, it's honestly the price of rent, the price of groceries, the price of things, at least where I'm at in my life right now, is what is always in the back of my mind. But for students, it's and of course, like, abortion rights is just a fundamental human right. I think it's abortion, climate, the same three, gun safety. But I do think though that the price of inflation, which is coming down, and I never blame Biden for that. I think that's what's actually plaguing an entire generation. Just the fact that we can't even think about owning a home anymore because it's just so expensive. And all the money you make goes right back into rent and groceries. And it's like, let alone politics. I'm just trying to figure out how to make enough money to survive. And like, one day I want to own a home, but you can't even think about that, really, if you're living in LA like I am. So those are the issues that are in my mind. They're not really being addressed politically, but I think that just comes down to you got to find a way to just succeed in life. It's competitive, but that's just how it's always been. And I think I'm just coming to terms with that as a young adult. I think separately from politics. And politics, I think Democrats have all the good issues, though. They've lowered student debt. They've abortion rights, gun safety. So that's my.
What about the migrant issue? How is that playing out within the Gen Z or the youth?
Me personally, everyone in California, nobody talks about it. California is made up, I think, the biggest population of immigrants They're amazing. They're usually the most hardworking. They work at almost every store, restaurants, and I think I have no issue with the migration. I think it's being played up on Fox News, maybe along the border states. And I know they're trying to make it seem like, it's always the age-old issue that the migrants are coming in and taking jobs, and that's why you're struggling. That's why you can't afford things, because migrants are getting all of your jobs and they don't have to pay taxes. And so it's just a messaging thing that I think we've got to just educate about. I'm not really concerned with that as an issue. But
the messaging is a real problem. You're so spot on that. Yeah. The messaging, that's what needs really to, in my opinion, to be addressed. It's how they're messaging this. First and foremost, Americans are, for the most part, snobbish. You're not going to get an American to go pick strawberries. You're just not going to. I remember my father was telling me when, right after the war, when they ended up in Toronto, in Canada, they went out one day, they were picking like blueberries or something like that. And it was for like a bucket, you got $1. And he and his sisters, they went, to see how many buckets that they can do and so on. He said he didn't walk for 3 days. His back was killing him. Right? Then again, don't forget, being Jewish, we all have bad backs. But, it's backbreaking. It's backbreaking work. And Americans just won't do it. Well, right. Okay. If Americans aren't going to do it, and you want your strawberries, somebody has to do it. Yeah. If you had to pay the type of $20 an hour wage, whatever your state wage requirement is, you're going to pay $15 for a little basket of strawberries. And then you're going to have the whole world up in it. Holy shit, right? Fucking strawberries, $15 a basket. The whole nine is what? So they want what they want, but they don't want what they don't believe. It's all, as far as I'm concerned, misinformation, disinformation. And the fact that they now want to say, under Joe Biden, under Joe, you can't get a job because of migrants. The entire immigration is out of control. Migration is out of control. Immigration has been a problem for 50 plus years. Migration has been a problem. Okay, there are more coming in today. It's very funny because a buddy of mine who's from LA, I said, how often in LA do you actually see a migrant? And he goes, unless I go into a certain area where they're located, no. Another buddy of mine here in New York turned around and said, because they set up an encampment, a migrant encampment under the bridge in Randall's Island. And that's where they are. So unless you're going to go into Randall's Island to see them, you don't even know that they're there.
Yeah.
Right? I just think that the messaging on this is bullshit. And I do believe that, I think it was Senator Lankford came up with, a Republican, in a bipartisan manner, but written by Senator Lankford, the most aggressive, conservative immigration plan in the last at least 30 plus years. And you know who wouldn't bring it to the floor?
Yeah,
MAGA Mike Johnson.
Yeah, so it's all
Republicans refused. Yep,
it's terrible. Again, the border. I think it's another. That messaging's not gonna work. What's interesting though, in LA, we were talking about issues. There is like a big homelessness crisis here that I've noticed, because I've grown up here, and it's just gotten really bad. And that's something that never gets talked about in politics either, and that's of course related to the rising cost of housing and rent. I don't know if it's like that in New York, but it's been pretty increasingly exponentially getting gnarlier here.
Well, you really have two issues when it comes to homeless. Yes, I would say that there's a segment of it that is related to the rising cost of rents and homes and so on. That's not what I see as the issue. I see as part of the issue the fact that, at least here in New York, there was a time when they were using mental health facilities in order to house many of the homeless. That has all been shut down for a variety of reasons. And unfortunately, many of these homeless individuals need psychiatric help. Another issue has to do with veterans. A large portion of homeless are veterans. So imagine this. Imagine this, right? Veteran homelessness, to me, is the most despicable thing imaginable as it relates to a veteran. This individual puts on the uniform. They go to war to protect our democracy, our country. They come back, PTSD and all other sorts of psychological and physical ailments, all right?
Yeah.
Whether it's as a result of injury that they sustain there, and now that they're on, forms of painkillers, opiates, etc.
Right.
They lost their jobs. The fact that this person who put on a uniform and fought for our democracy is living on the street, going through garbage cans, looking for food or asking for money for handouts, I find so reprehensible. I find it so fucking disgusting that there's a guy that's out there that is building a $2.5 billion home. And you have veterans that cannot afford a fucking donut and a cup of coffee. I'm dead ass serious. Not even to be, it angers me when I see homeless vets. It drives me crazy. This person sacrificed their life or was willing to sacrifice their life for us. And this is the payback that you get. It's so reminiscent to me of shit that I saw in the 70s when veterans were coming back from Vietnam. And instead of getting a thank you, a hug, a kiss, a fucking chocolate chip cookie, a baked fresh chocolate chip cookie, they were getting spit on. I have such a fundamental problem with that.
Yeah, it's like that Oliver Stone, Tom Cruise movie. He comes back and he's not a hero because they went into a war. 4th of July. 4th of July, yeah, 4th of July, amazing. It's awful. And even the VA building near me, it's so run down, and there are homeless veterans just kind of wandering around the site with no. It's horrible. There's no food. There's no real legitimate housing. So those are things that
no real medical care.
No medical care, no. So that's an issue that's just kind of not talked about on a national level, really. So yeah, I mean, those are the negative parts of the political climate that I think people check out of politics, and they're like, hey, well, where I'm living, there's homelessness, price of things are really high. I don't really care too much about general politics, and you can't really blame them, but we just got to get them involved as well. And Biden is the guy who's going to provide more federal funding to these departments, including VAs and veterans healthcare. And so, yeah, that's the bottom line. We got to stay loud about who's going to help the most, right? Yeah, you said if you agree with 6 of the 12 things, you got to vote for the person.
Yep, agreed. Let me ask you a question, because you're very prolific on social media, and so on. You have an incredible following. What strategies are you currently employing to ensure that your messaging resonates with your target audience and effectively drives engagement? Because you have a great engagement.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'd be honest, I don't necessarily.
By the way, you're not supposed to say, oh, yeah. You're supposed to say, hey, thanks. I appreciate that. Wow, you follow me. That's really great, Michael.
Michael,
yeah.
Well, thank you. I'm just honored to be in your presence on this show.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, about that. Hey, by the way, I loved being at your live show for this. Was awesome. You need to do that again, man. You're a performer. You're a performer.
Oh, yeah, you should see how I can actually juggle too. Ask my mom. I'll never forget when I started learning how to juggle. I went into the fridge. I took 3 eggs. raw
Yeah.
eggs. And I started juggling. My mom was like, don't you dare, don't you dare. So I start juggling. I could do them with tennis balls, right?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the first one hit the ground. I went to catch that one. The second one ended up. The third one, I said, oh, fuck it. I turned and let the third one, I walked out. And my mom yelled. Did she yell, you get your ass here and you clean that up?
Yeah. And look at you now. Look at you now.
Oh, yeah.
So
a juggling witness.
Yeah. Juggling witness. Yeah, you're about to testify. Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
I want to.
So tell me,
back to that.
What are the strategies?
So thank you, first of all. Secondly, the strategy is it's just to post every time I hear a story I think is worth sharing with people. I never thought about, how to grow. Obviously, I think about how to grow and make sure people see it because that's why I do it. But I'm honest, the TikTok algorithm has just been pretty friendly to me. I feel like I just post it and it goes off. There's not really much, because I know you can spend days in the weeds thinking about how to strategize and grow. And it's just, if you're not getting into that algorithm, which nobody really knows how to do, that it's just kind of something it's either your content is working or it ain't working. That's my philosophy. Some days I'll post it and if it gets like, 200 views, I'm like, all right, I guess that just didn't work. I don't think you can overthink it too much. I know there's a lot of industries now that are rising about, analytics, marketing, how to make sure we develop the right content creation. But at the end of the day, if your content's not hitting, then you got to switch the content. So I think it's a very simple thing that we'll never be able to crack the algorithms. So you just got to post a lot, though. I think massive output is the best way to make sure you hit, because one of those videos is bound to hit.
Makes sense. Let me ask you this then, on the same genre then, how do you approach collaborating with other activists and creators to amplify your impact on the political issues?
Well, I'm interesting because I don't collaborate at all. I don't collaborate because I just like doing stuff on my own and like my own voice, especially when it comes to politics. I don't think other than collaborating with MeidasTouch during the 2022 midterms, which is awesome, but they let me just do my own thing, which is great. So I haven't really collaborated all that much. I mean, maybe I should, but I think I think I don't want to come off as an activist or too preachy. And I'm really against that because I think people are turned off by preachy activists, especially during this time right now. So I just I tend to stay rogue with all of my things other than going on a podcast like this.
Right. Well, wait, but now, because you're very active also on TikTok.
Definitely. That's my main thing. Yeah.
So you know what? Because I do. Okay. So here's the scenario. And I got a little bit into trouble for it because, being a witness and all, they want me not to do anything. I just say I'm not going to talk about, the case. I'm not talking about the guy. I'm not talking about any of that stuff. I can talk about other things like Israel, Hamas. I can talk about the Palestinian, Jewish protesting that's going on at the schools. I can talk about gun safety. I talk about everything else other than that.
Other than that.
I have a sleeping problem. My brain doesn't shut down. And it's actually, it's worse now, of course, than before. And so instead, I basically have watched everything on streaming. I've watched everything. You name the show, I've watched it. So what I did is a buddy of mine said, how come you're not on TikTok? I said, well, actually, I have a TikTok account, but I don't really do it. He says, why don't you do it? Create a 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time show, and then just do it. And I do it like 6 nights a week or sometimes 5 nights a week, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Why don't you join me tonight? Jump on. I have folks all the time come on. Rosie O'Donnell came on the other day, and she spent about 15 minutes with me. I get a massive audience, by the way. Massive awesome. Audience. Maybe you join me.
I'd love to.
You come on. It pops on in the bottom. There are things that I'm not going to talk about. But listen, I'm not here to tell you what to talk about, what to say. That's one thing that I will never do. You have your rights, and I'm not infringing upon anybody's rights. But it's just I only say, when people ask me the question about it, I'm sorry, I don't talk about that. until after the trial. I'm not talking about any of that. And if you feel like it, it's on my TikTok, 10 p.m., like 5-6 days a week. And I do it. I start at 10. Sometimes I go till midnight. It's only until I get tired. And then I just say, all right, you know what? I'm actually now beginning to get tired. So I'm getting off in 3 minutes. And, people jump back on, and we call that quits. But let me then move on and just ask you this. All right. As a producer, content creator, and this Gen Z, I'm going to call you the activist. How are you perceiving right now the current political climate? What's your overall arching theme?
Well, I think you asked me that before, but with this new perspective, what the climate is, like I said, I think it's very unpleasant. Even me, I don't talk about politics in my personal life really with people because I just find it to be rather unpleasant. I want this to be over as soon as possible so I can get back and never think about Donald Trump again or think about any of the Marjorie Taylor Greene again. I mean, I'd like to think that it all ends after 2024. It probably won't. That's just where I'm at. I'm very fed up and just overwhelmed and almost, I guess, fatigued by the activism and by this never-ending election cycle that's been going on for the past 4 years. Fatigue is the good word I would use, but I'm going to commit all the way till the end.
That makes perfect sense. So then let me ask you this. If you can you discuss a particular challenge that you faced in your advocacy work and, more importantly, overcoming it? How did you overcome it?
Well, I think a big challenge is if you have a following, and I know that this sounds sort of pretentious, but if you have a following, you do feel obliged, and I have my newsletter too that I do Monday through Friday, you feel obliged to your audience to continue putting out content for them and trying to, advocate for the cause of like saving democracy, right? Defeating Donald Trump. But there are some days where I feel like, am I even helping or am I just posting about Donald Trump because I think that's what they want to hear about? And then I'm to ask myself, well, why am I even doing this then if I don't think this is helping the cause? But you still got to put out the content. So sometimes I grapple with like the whole idea of being an activist online. Like, is that really helping? Am I really contributing to the cause? But you just got to post the content and just kind of stick to your underlying belief that if one person's mind is changed by any of this content, then I have done my job. There's just waking up every day and posting about it. Posting sometimes you feel like into a void of never ending, talking about the same shit over and over and over again.
Yeah,
which
I know
you
that.
You can lose your purpose. You can lose your whole like fulfillment and joy from doing it.
Yeah. Well, then, how do you handle the criticism or the backlash that you receive for your political views or activism? And I ask you that question because you'll see when you join me on TikTok or if you check any of my social media platforms, forgetting about the bots because they're just on like X, formerly Twitter, they're just so fucking rampant that they have ruined that platform altogether. 90% of the time you're fighting on X, you're fighting with somebody that doesn't exist. But on TikTok, you're actually fighting with people that are so entrenched into their ideology that the second you turn around and you say something based upon fact, not innuendo, not your made-up fiction, the attacks are ruthless. They're nasty as can be. They are as mean-spirited, vile, that it's unimaginable. So how do you handle it?
Oh, man. Well, the way I handle it is by never looking at it. And I'm not kidding. I never read any comments. Never. It's a rule of mine. So unfortunately, I miss some of the good comments and like I miss connecting with some people who are definitely like on the same boat as I am. But you just can't look. That's the only solution. If you look, we're human beings. You're going to get your feelings hurt. You're going to take it personally. Like I get attacked all the time. Like, oh, your forehead, your teeth. I used to look and it bothered me, but now I'm like, okay, just never read it. So you can't read it. And you can't take the good compliments personally too, because then you'll take the bad ones personally. So if you can, just avoid looking, just do output. Just output, no look. I never look at TikTok. I think that app is toxic. Even though I'm on it, I think it's a toxic app that keeps you addicted and hooked on. And if you read the comments, especially as a creator, you're doomed. You're doomed. You'll never do it again. Like
I read them. I read them all the time.
But you're crazy.
And I actually comment. I even invite some of them on. Like I had this guy that came on, and yeah. He was from where the hell was he from? And I realized that, you know, obviously the second that he joined me into it, he's wearing a "Make America Great Again" hat, you know, and a shirt. And in the background are a bunch of photos of Trump and all that other stuff. Yeah. And I was like, that's okay. I like to hear the other side. The problem, and when I dropped him from the event, was only when he said, there is nothing that you can say to me. There is no fact that you can try to give to me that will get me to change my mind. And that was sort of the straw that broke my back, where you're not even willing to listen to the other side. You think you're going to yell louder than me as the moderator in order to convince anybody, one, that you're not a fucking idiot, two, that your facts, or I should say your innuendo, because you're yelling them and repeating them again and again and again and again, somehow is going to turn a lie into a fact, into a truth. It does not. And that's when I said, you know, I would have let you stay on, and I would have asked you some questions and let you ask me some questions until you turned around and you said what I consider to be the most stupidest comment that a person can make. It's ignorant. It is it's fear. Almost to the point it's narcissistic in the fact that you believe yourself to be so much better, smarter than everybody else, that whatever it is that you say is factually accurate, despite the fact that it has been disproven not once, not twice, but over 1,000 times. And when you say, well, let me ask you, there was a study that was conducted. I don't care about the study. It's not accurate. Okay. It's been written about in the New York Times. I don't trust any of them. They're liberal papers. You know, what you're talking to is a fucking blockhead, right? Somebody who doesn't want to hear anything but their own voice and thinking that they are a preacher, right? And somehow or another, by repeating the lie over, it's Stalin-esque, repeating the lie over and over, it will ultimately become the truth.
That's right. Well, I think that group is, that cult actually is a better word. They're shrinking though. Like they're shrinking.
I agree.
So there's not that many. I mean, there's a lot of a disturbing amount of them in the country, but it's shrinking to the point where there's not enough of them to carry that man to a second term. But it is, you know, I like talking. I'm fascinated talking to people with opposing views because I think I'm right. But I also, if I hear some point of view that I'm like, oh, that makes actually sense, you can take it. But if someone's not willing to listen, then that's like they just have a fear of their whole belief system being incorrect.
Right. Right. Could you imagine they'd have nothing to talk, you know, when they're sitting at the campfire at their double wide? I don't get it. But let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to other young people who are as passionate as you about political activism, but unlike you, may feel intimidated or unsure about getting involved because of the violence and because of the political climate?
Yeah, I mean, my advice personally, including even, I was a little nervous coming on to this show because because I thought we were going to talk about the Gaza-Israel protests at UCLA, because that's where I went, and I'm Gen Z, and I'm not a total expert on the conflict, but I do have some opinions, and I want to be fair and make sure I'm doing my best answers to reflect how I feel and not, to offend anyone. But I would say, like, in the same way I approached this, I would tell a young person it's better to go on and do it than to not do it at all. And just go out and post and do what you really believe in and try to be respectful about it. And then just don't care. If it gets one view, then you got one more view than you would have gotten had you not posted it. Don't compare yourself to other creators too with the view count. I know that can be very detrimental to it can just influence you to just stop doing it. But I think you gotta just like any business, right? If you make $10 in sales, you made $10 more than you did if you didn't start your business. So just start and go for it. Whether you're doing political activism or whether you want to start a business or make a movie, right? Just do it. Don't be afraid to do it, because we all admire everyone who's gone out and done it. And then even if you have a small group of people watching you at first, that's cool. That's cool.
Yep.
So
then let me ask you this, because how are you staying informed about current events and political developments? And then how does that method help you to inform your advocacy work? I'm always curious. Like, I know where I get my content from.
Yeah.
I read basically every newspaper.
Definitely.
I'll watch the news. The problem that I find with the news is it's generally the top 3 to 4 topics. And those 3 to 4 topics stay in the news day in and day out. The Israel-Hamas war is not going anywhere, right?
No.
Neither is Russia-Ukraine, right? But there are so many other issues that are going on, like gun safety, like climate change, that I feel it's imperative to keep that in the conversation as well.
Yeah, or you lose interest in the bigger issues, right?
Right.
I get my news. I like reading the hard print. To be honest, I never watch CNN, MSNBC. I've just been repulsed by there's great anchors on MSNBC and CNN, no doubt, but I just find they always are adding some sort of spin, some sort of.
Trust me, I know that one.
And I know you go on MSNBC, so when you go on, I like listening to you.
I mean, I was, CNN. You got Ellie Honig, who I used to consider, I guess I still kind of do, a friend. The fucking cheap shots that they take. Oh, Michael Cohen's credibility. Take it easy, folks. All right, let me be very clear about something. Just wait till I testify before you start attacking my credibility. Right? Oh my God, he's a liar, he's a perjurer. How many more times do I have to say the same thing over and over again? Finish the sentence, which is what the lie was about. First, I was never charged with perjury. It was 1,001 violation, which is a different charge. But most people can't understand. Bringing Bill Barr onto CNN, bringing Ty fucking Raleigh finger, fat Santa looking scumbag. Same shit. They bring them on to fucking give you a jab. What's that?
They brought Michael Avenatti.
Another fucking joke.
That's crazy. Like, why would you bring a prison? So they're doing
Ari Melber on MSNBC.
And I like Ari Melber too. He's been pretty legally sound, but then when he brought him on, I'm like, what are you doing? Why would you legitimize this guy?
It's called ratings. Looking for ratings.
Exactly. That's why I can't watch it, though. What are they doing for ratings? So you try to go to the more CBS news where they just lay it down, and even they're starting to get into a little bit of the headlines and stuff. So you just got to really be good at parsing through the news of what's the facts and where's the spin. And then, of course, I put my own spin on stuff, but I think my spin is the realistic, hey, guys, just don't listen to this spin. This is what's actually happening here. And it's usually because I'm pretty optimistic about, as you know, as intense as this political climate is, I'm super optimistic about the Democrats and Joe Biden this November. I think most people are just sick of Donald Trump and the Marjorie Greens and the QAnon Nazi bullshit on the right.
Yeah, so, I too have had enough. So, Dash, look, the hour goes by quick here on Mea Culpa. My last question for you is kind of like looking ahead. What are your hopes and goals for the future of political engagement?
Well, for political engagement, that's an interesting question. My future is just always to be speaking out if there is a villain in politics, I'm going to be speaking out against them. That's always my goal. That's why I started, and we'll see after Donald Trump loses, goes to prison, or passes away. There will be another person probably to try to fill his shoes, and I'll be speaking out against them big time. And also,
wait, you don't like speaking to political villains? You're talking to one for an hour right now.
Oh no, you're a villain turned hero turned protagonist.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. And
I'm kind of like Bizarro, right? You know, the opposite of Superman, right? Who decides one day he wants to turn and be good.
Yeah, it's amazing. You did the full 360. I'm excited to talk to you after the court hearing too.
Yeah, well,
Michael, any more books you're writing? Dude, your last
I'm working on one, the trilogy, right? You know, the first two, Revenge. New York Times bestsellers, Disloyal #1, Revenge #6. Not bad for a guy whose teacher in 5th grade English turned around and said, an author you will not be. And I was like, I wish she was alive today. I wish she was alive today. I would I'd bring her signed copies.
You got revenge on her. Well,
yeah, wow. There you go.
Yeah, damn.
Well, Dash, thank you, my brother. Great to see you. Loving that 1970s sort of like porn star, you know, kind of look. Yeah. You know, what's with the mustache? The long hair, you got the mustache, you got that whole 70s vibe going. I'm loving it.
Gotta try something new. Gotta shake it up.
Gotta get like a 1970 Corvette Stingray hatchback, the whole bit, cruising down LA.
That's great. Yeah, I gotta do it, man. You gotta grow it out too. Get the mustache before you hit the camera.
My wife says no, but you're looking awesome. Thank you for everything that you're doing. Thanks for being such a positive voice to Gen Z, and I'll catch you one night on my TikTok. We're gonna have a lot more fun together.
Wow.
I'm really proud. I'm really proud of you for doing what you're doing. I really am. I say that as a in a personal way. Really proud of what you're doing, sticking out there. I know the backlash sucks. I know when they start to attack you, it sucks. Even if you try to pretend not to read anything, it still unfortunately bleeds through. I give you a lot of credit for your fortitude and for staying in there. The fight. It's so important, and Gen Z is such an important part of this upcoming election, and you're a big part of it.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Michael. That means so much, and I just want to say I'm grateful for your platform and for everything you've done, and I am optimistic as well about Gen Z, about them coming together after this, and coming together like you were talking about, finding a higher ground where we can unite instead of fighting each other here in America. I think it's heated now, but it will die down again. Tensions will cool. So I'm optimistic. And thank you, Mike.
Be well, my friend. I'll see you soon.
Likewise.